the second entry. This is a great event. You get to practice coming to the stage. Okay, I'm Jani Kenttala. I will be talking about supply chain security for the next 30 minutes or so. Security can be annoying every once in a while, especially to the people when security people bring bad news to somebody else. Quite often they are not happy. If you are bringing bad news to someone who didn't even ask for it, it could be that they are even less happy. So how to turn this into positive? So when you do vendor or supply chain security checking, if you want to do it in scale, there is no time to ask permissions. So basically you are doing it and you're not getting their permission. Then if you deliver bad news, you might be worried that how will they react. So this presentation is a story about how to turn this kind of work into something positive. And it turns out that it pays off to kick your vendors on the security issues. Quite many will actually appreciate it. The most mature vendors have these Hall of Fames. They'll make a big deal out of the things that they have had vulnerabilities and they have fixed them. And they are thankful for you for helping them to do so. I really love how the scene has changed. 10 years back, nobody ever had any vulnerabilities. So the scene has changed quite a lot. The context for this presentation is that in Finland, 150 companies, a little bit more, did supply chain checking for their vendors. This was a government-sponsored project. It's a Finnish word, ketjutonttu. Tonttu is kind of like Santa's little helper, and ketju means chain, so this was Santa's little helpers for supply chain. And companies want to participate in this kind of activities because it's a really easy way for them to check the security of their supply chain. And government likes it because this is a really straightforward way to make your national critical infrastructure more resilient. Few words about me. So I'm a security researcher, mostly during some rare nights, and I'm a security entrepreneur during the days. And I like dull vulnerabilities, and I like dull security issues. It's because if they are dull, it probably means that there are a lot of them. It's something that is quite common. And when it's quite common, it means that there's impact to be made. If you can eradicate these kind of dull vulnerabilities, you have a chance, if you are doing that, you have a chance to make a big difference in the world. So, I'm not trying to trap you. There's a QR code. If you don't want to ask any questions today, please do so in the LinkedIn, for example. So why should you care about this presentation? So let me check. Do we have any bounty hunters on the audience today? Okay, a few. Do we have security and IT people who are worried about the supply chain of their own company or thinking things like that? Okay, quite a few. All right, then one more random technical check. How many of you know what is subdomain takeover? Okay, thank you. Now I can calibrate my presentation. Okay, so this is for your kind of people. And lastly, if there are anybody who has a bigger ecosystem, more things to worry about rather than just own company, then this presentation is for you also, because you might learn how to improve security in scale. So, what did we do? There are ways to check the security of the vendors or take care of the security of the vendors. Most of them, I'm being told and I've heard, are annoying for the vendors. You can buy vendor risk score services. They will scan the vendor and rate the vendor based on what they see, how many vulnerabilities and stuff like that. If you don't like that kind of approach, then you can do other stuff, like you can push vendor questionnaires to the vendors. You can have 100 questions, how are you doing this and that? And that drives people mad. It's very laborious. And then, of course, a little bit easier approach is that you just push security requirements to your vendors. But there's a problem. Let me ask this question. Have you ever seen a company who says on the paper that we are not doing security? We are not that interested about it. No, we don't care about audits. Yes, everybody takes security very seriously on paper. But when you start testing them, then you start to see a little bit difference between different companies. So we wanted to make something that scales, something that you can do in a big scale, but it would be sensible, it would not be annoying. Hopefully the vendors would actually even find it useful. So I will go through a few steps how you can do this yourself. Maybe you are a bug bounty hunter, you want to do things in scale. Maybe you need to do this for the supply chain of your own company and so forth. So step number 1, map your own external attack surface. And one thing what is quite often forgotten is that vendors are also your external attack surface, not just your own infra. So you need to consider them as well. So there are non-technical methods. List the ones that you remember. You are working in a company, you are using different systems, you already know a list of vendors. Then go and ask around. Go to the procurement, what stuff have we bought in the last 1 year, if you are a bigger company, and so on. And run around different business units, what are you using, and stuff like that. This is a really easy way to involve people in security. They can help you, and maybe the security people are not the ones who are always blocking and preventing stuff. Now you are doing stuff together. So involve the people in the company. And then there are, of course, technical ways to do it. Just list your domains, start checking the TXT records from the DNS, what have we authorized to operate under our name, stuff like that, and do an external attack surface mapping for your own company. And then once you have done that, then check that, okay, these IPs, where are these? These are these cloud services, hosting companies, so on and so forth. And then you will do external attack surface mapping for your vendors. So this is like external attack surface mapping. So you can use your favorite OS recon tools, Subfinders, AMAS, whatever you like. There are tons of ways to do this nowadays. So if you don't know any, with a quick Googling, you will find plenty of those. If you don't like tools, if you want to understand what kind of actual things you need to do, you need to find subdomains of the companies, whatever they are using. You can use for that certificate transparency logs. If you have passive DNS at your disposal, you can use that and so forth. Then it's time to find the vulnerabilities. At this point, you need to be nice also. In this method, if you want to do it fast, if you want to do it for a big amount of companies, you cannot be asking permission for it, because permissions take a lot of time, and quite often you don't get the permission. So you need to find ways to do this check in a way that you can be ethical, but still have some relevant results. So you can do your list of things. This is what we have done. So we check, for example, takeoverable subdomains. So not many hands were raised when I asked, so I'll quickly explain what that means. So this happens usually when you start using some cloud service. You set up a service to the cloud, and you will point your own domain name to that cloud service. Or maybe marketing does that, or whatever. And then at some day in the future, that cloud service is decommissioned, and the DNS record is not removed. So at that point, an attacker can go to the cloud service and set up his own service there and ask for that same name you used to use. And at this point, the criminal can operate under your domain name. They will use it quite often to something like sharing harmful content to the internet, or I've seen internet casinos being set up to a domain of a company and so forth. But they could also, if they are smart, they could circumvent the browser protection by injecting JavaScript and attack the services inside that domain. So that's subdomain takeover problem. Then you can look for end-of-life servers. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And you can check for exposed services, for example. Only the worst ones I would advise. And what is surprising that for a trivial checks like these, 1 out of 7 companies will typically have something to fix. So that's quite a lot for even for a simple check like this. So as a result, with this approach, for the vendors of 150 companies, approximately about 2,300 vendors, we reported something like 840 issues of these categories. Today, something like 25% of them are fixed, 7% of them the vendor said that, okay, we have other kind of protection, this is not a relevant issue for us, and 68% is not fixed at the moment. Okay, a few words about the end-of-life services. So how do you do that? Pretty straightforward. You do the same thing all the vulnerability scanners do, but at the first part, don't do the second part. So you check the version strings, but ignore the typical thing that the vulnerability scanners do. They check the version string and then they check that what CVEs, what vulnerabilities this version has, and that creates a lot of false positives. So if you would be sending reports about these, you would get mad recipients, because you would be sending something like 11 vulnerabilities to them, and then they need to go through them, and then they figure out that, okay, none of this is true. So skip the CVE part. But look for the strings that tell you that the server is already so old that it's not getting any security patches anymore. Again, simple check like this, you will find quite a lot of them. You will find old Linux distributions, you will find Windows systems that are older than my teenage daughters, and so on. Then a few words about the exposed services. So 1.6 trillion connections later, you find quite a lot of open databases. So there's almost like 100 if you count the MySQLs and MariaDBs and Postgres and so on and so forth. So that's quite a lot. But again, how far can you go without permission? What we did is we just check that is this database visible, because the visibility of the database really often is a mistake already. We do not try to log in and steal the data. That, in our opinion, requires permission. So you find quite a lot of these. Then you find different remote services. RDP is the way most common one. And I was wondering that do people keep RDP open on purpose? But looks like in most of the cases it's not, because they do close the ports when you report them. Then there are a bunch of others. Something I would like to highlight is FortiGate management. This is also something that we find quite often, and it's not a good idea to expose FortiGate management to the internet, because they have had quite a lot of vulnerabilities in the past, and it's quite likely that they probably will have more of them in the future. So even though they are patched quickly, you just cannot share it to the internet, because the internet will break in quite fast. All right, that's about finding the vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities are not the main point in this work. it's really good that you find vulnerabilities and they will get fixed. But actually, the main purpose of the work is to get the conversation going. So now it's time to get the conversation going. Why do you want to get the conversation going? If you want to measure what's the maturity of that vendor in cybersecurity, you want to understand that how do they deal with security issues when you report one. Vulnerabilities come and go. What's more important, in my opinion, is that when you inform a vendor about the vulnerability, what will they do? Will they ignore it? Will they fix it fast? Will they fix it slow? And stuff like that. So, you need to have the conversation. So let's make it happen. Here's the problem. Very few of the vendors are actually prepared for receiving security reports. In our case, 7% of the vendors did have security TXT on place, informing that this is our policy and this is where you should be reporting and stuff like that. A little bit more had the web page about the security policy. So let's be kind. Let's say 15% are prepared to receive a report. Everybody else will be quite confused when they get the report about the security issues. People will think that you are a bug bounty hunter. You will be extorting them in no time. People will think that you are a salesperson. You are trying to get the customer to a sales call. Or you are some kind of scammer anyway. I don't know what's going on, but this is some kind of scam. Or it's a bot. I don't need to care. Or whatever reason to think you are irrelevant. So we need to avoid this. So there are a few ways you can minimize this annoying fact. There are some ways that you can more easily get through with your reports. So if you use email templates for your reports, it's strongly recommended that you do for the efficiency. Also have a hint of human when you send the email. So like, for example, we have this standard automation creates this part, but there's always the person who is sending the report, there's some kind of human analysis of the situation. Few words, does not need to be much, but something that people will understand that there's actually a human sending it. If I would see just a report like that, my brain will just shortcut. It's a marketing email and I will just skip it. Then the second thing is you need to explain the context. Because people will think that you want money and stuff like that. So you need to explain that why you don't need the money. Okay, you could be lying, yes. But fun fact, people are interesting. If you are on a big line on the airport, if you just cut everybody off, people will be more mad than if you cut them off and you say, I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry. Then it's totally fine. So you need to be explaining yourself. That helps a lot. Another thing is don't withhold any information. Withholding information will put you in the same bucket with the bug bounty hunters and the salespeople. I have lots of people complaining about, it's 2023, salespeople have used, like, to my knowledge, at least 13 years this tactic that we'll dig up a vulnerability and then we'll contact the potential customer and we get them to a call where we reveal the vulnerability and maybe they need to pay a little bit for a product to get to know that vulnerability. So that just drives people mad. I don't know anybody ever has gotten any sales with that approach. So if you are setting up a startup or something like that and you have this same idea, let's inform, even if you give out free the vulnerability to the company, it's really hard to get to the sales conversation afterwards. So you need to find other ways contacting people. Then try to be helpful, be available for questions. You can say that you are available for questions, but you can say even that you can call me. 0.00001% will actually call you, so it's an easy promise. But it will change the tone of the report quite a lot. And then after you have reported, you can be helpful. So 95% of the time, that's just being a little bit annoying. Hello, I did a routine checkup and I noticed that you haven't fixed the issues yet. Can I help in some way? Because quite many will forget the first report. Some of them won't see the first report. Some of them will see it, but they forget. Some of them will see it, they will forward it to somebody else, and that somebody else will forget. We people are funny, we just forget stuff. So some follow-ups will raise the likelihood that the issues actually will get fixed. Then if you actually get to help, there are things like this vendor, they don't have any security or IT people themselves. They are relying heavily on their vendors. So you need to be talking to their vendors, what is this about, and so forth and so on. And sometimes you need to help with the risk assessment. I will give you one anecdote about that in a moment, after a few slides. Then if you are doing this for yourself, you don't need grading. But if you need to communicate about your work to somebody else, to your boss, to the procurement department, or whoever is the person you need to convey a message, then it's a good idea to grade the companies. You can have your own grading. This is what we use. So we have a simple ABC. Sometimes I wish we had more categories, but then it will get, because this is not exact science, so having more exact numbers is not a good idea after all. So we do A means that the vendor fixes issues fast and communicates properly. Then B takes the issue seriously, but the fixes take time. We will take a look why that is in a moment. And then C, no answer and no fixes. Sometimes some organizations end up into this category C while in principle they wouldn't deserve it. Maybe it's a false positive. Maybe your report is a false positive. But then, on the other hand, we have had vendors who thought that our report was false positive, and when they responded, we were able to work that out, and the vendor realized that it's not a false positive. So I would think that a good vendor does communicate with the reporter, so I don't feel that bad putting them into the C category as well. So right now the numbers of that Ketjutonttu campaign, in A category they are 80, B 59, C 57. So as you can see, they are pretty even. If you are a mathematician and you calculate this all together, you will notice that it's not 2,300, which is the amount of vendors we have been checking. We have few of those still unrated, and they will go to the B and C category. And based on experience, vendors will go pretty much 1/3 to each category. And now it's really hard for me to decide that is this good or bad. On the other hand, A and B care about security, and then on the other hand, B and C are not able to fix the issues quickly, which is sad. So I don't know if the glass is 2/3 full or 2/3 empty. Some anecdotes and stereotypes in the ABC categories of companies. So in the A category, we have the pro. Not much to say about this. Fixes the issues really fast, communicates clearly, basically tells we are going to fix this in 3 days, then they fix it in 3 days, and that's it. Then we have something I love, a relentless hunter. So especially with the big organization, it's sometimes difficult for them to find who actually owns the system that needs fixing. So there was this one company, for example, in Finland, really large company. They had an open database on a service. It was hosted on some service provider, but it was under their domain. And they couldn't find the owner for it. The security people, they went to different departments and do you own this and do you own this, and nothing happened. And then they went to the financial department and asked that who is paying the bills for this hosting service, tried to find the owner that way. And then at the end of the day, they went through some really old ticketing systems and find the owner from really old tickets. So they are relentless hunters like that. They do not give up until the case is properly dealt with. Then I have an Estonian bonus, do it in scale. First time I saw this in Estonia. I was doing a security audit. It's already, I guess, something like 15 years ago, so I probably can say that it was for X-Road. And we had to do a lot of work to find vulnerabilities, but we did find, for example, one. And I was prepared to fight that, yes, this is a vulnerability and stuff like that. In the meeting, when we started talking about that vulnerability, the person who had been implementing the X-Road said that, yes, I already fixed this. It's the last night's build. I went through the whole code base, and I found similar vulnerabilities from 7 different places. I have fixed them also. So I was like, I've been a fan of Estonians ever since. Then category B, the slowest vendor. There are many reasons vendors are slow. One reason is what I just told you. They just cannot find who owns this system. Marketing department somewhere has bought something. This is another region of this multinational company, and so on and so forth. Sometimes, I have heard many times, we have forwarded this report to our SOC in Canada. They will be dealing this. And that almost means that's the place where all the vulnerabilities go to die. It just never get fixed. But for example, this example I'm thinking about very much later on, those got fixed, so let's not be too hard on them. Then we have the live in the moment vendors. These vendors are building things fast. They are coming up with new services, but nobody actually stops and thinks that what's the life cycle of this service. Especially they don't think that what happens when this is nobody uses this anymore. So what's the end result? It's that the services will be run indefinitely. So you find something like some service built on Internet Information Server version 6. On Windows that has long time ago, it didn't get any patches anymore and so forth. And now you have a service running on IIS 6. You need to move it to a completely different platform. You have no idea who built it and stuff like that. So it will take time. Then on the C category, we have silent treatment. This is probably 90% of the C category. No answers, no fixes. That's quite straightforward. Then we have, there is no problem. Most common one, we inform that you have an exposed database. And they said, no, it's not a problem. We are not using that database anymore. And then we got, but you did used to use it, right? Yes. So there might be some data in it, I guess. So I don't know what's the thought process behind that this is not a problem. So this is the most typical one. Then there was one for the subdomain takeover, for example. This was really painful for me. It was a vendor who is doing lots of stuff for the Finnish critical infra. And they had obvious subdomain takeover vulnerabilities. We had seen that the domain where they were pointing to were actually being taken over in practice. So we knew that this is a real problem. And then how to fix the subdomain takeover problem? You go and remove the broken DNS entry from your DNS server. It takes something like 5 minutes. So really easy to fix, and a problem that you have seen that is being exploited. So then you get this message that we have done a risk assessment. Okay? What was the result of that risk assessment? Then you don't hear anything from them anymore. The issues won't get fixed months after months. They stay there and nothing gets fixed. Only after the customers of that vendor hear about the same issue that they have, then it takes 2 days to fix the problem. So there is a bunch of there is no problem vendors out there. And then the last, but also the worst, so our IT is so broken that we cannot even take your report in. You will get from the email system something like quota is full or something like that. So I guess the subdomain takeover problem is least of their worries at that point. So how much time this takes? If you are planning to do something like this, it's not that bad. Again, if you are doing this for your own company, you can. Here we have actually 2 categories. So 120 minutes per company who you are doing this. So if you're doing this for one company, your own, then count 2 hours for listing the vendors. Then the rest of them depends on how many vendors you are going to take a look. So validating vendor, about 5 minutes. What's validating the vendor? If you have a bunch of these vendors already, you might have some vendors with different names multiple times. So you need to check that. Do I have duplicates? Is this actually a vendor or is this just some brand and the vendor behind it is something else? So you need to consider that kind of things and so on and so forth. 5 minutes for that, for each vendor. Then the external attack surface mapping and finding the vulnerabilities, that depends on your automation. I don't have a number for that. On our case, the automation does all of that, so it's close to 0 minutes. Then the sending the report, so you need to find the contact who to send the report to. You need to verify that the report actually makes sense and stuff like that. So 15 minutes for that. At first it will be longer, 30 minutes or something like that, but once you get the hang of it, it will be faster. And then facilitating the A-grade vendor, well, that's pretty simple. Send the email out, they will say that we fixed this, and then you congratulate them, a great job. So not that big of a task. But for the B and C vendors, you need to be following up. You need to be checking that, have they fixed? They haven't communicated anything, but have they fixed? And that takes a little bit of time. So, in summary, you can check your vendors in scale and still make it so that the work is sensible. You just need to pay attention to some small details, what we have gone through. Then finding the issues is actually the easy part. You will have content with whatever checks you will make. You will just do 50 vendors and a bunch of them will have some issues. So this is not a humongous amount of work, but yes, you need the automation part for that. And then finally, remember, if you do this, your work will be appreciated. So please go out there and help your vendors to fix the security problems. Thank you.
So, amazing. Any questions? Oh, here we go.
How many honeypots have you found during the vulnerability scanning, etc.?
0 that we know of. I thought we found 1 honeypot because there was this one reputational security company and we have found an old service from them. And they were saying that, no, we don't have any old services. And we said that, yes, you do. And then they said that, no, we don't. And I started wondering that, maybe this is a honeypot. And then one final follow-up. This is what we see when we connect the SSH to your server. And this is the version string. And then they come out, oh, oops. Actually, we do have some old services that they actually were running a up-to-date Debian, but they had been bringing some own custom SSH from old Debians, and they had brought the binary as well. So it was running. But I was this close to giving up that this must be a honeypot.
Yep, in the back there. And then there is one more question. This lunch was good, I say. Yes, please.
In the reports, I saw you grading the issues as low, medium, and high.
Yeah.
If you're complaining about the C-grade companies, I think it was, that people don't act on the issues as it's like not in the risk assessment. Should we be like not grading issues in our reports? To say, these are all issues, please fix them.
Yeah, that's the main thing to do. I agree with you about that. And the stuff we send to the vendor, there's no grading in that. We give the grade afterwards on how they performed. So we don't say that, please fix this, this is a C type of issue. Sometimes we separate. Again, we want to keep the vendors happy and positive because we don't want to cause any pissed off vendors. So we do say that we try to be honest. Yes, this is a quite small risk right now, but why wouldn't you fix this? It takes 5 minutes to fix it, and then you don't have to worry about it. So we do sometimes say that this is not such a big issue. But the grading actually happens after they have acted, so yeah.
Could we get the microphone to the lovely lady next to the camera?
I wonder how many times out of the cases where you get no response, your report email has just gotten stuck in some Microsoft spam filter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm quite tempted to put some tracking inside the emails, but then again, nowadays there's also tracking evasion by the Microsoft, so it's a very good question. Sometimes if we have time, we try multiple different contacts also. But if it's from the same organization, maybe we hit the same spam filter all the time. So, hey, but sometimes the last follow-up email we sent that we haven't heard anything from you, and you haven't fixed the issues. This means that you will be getting the worst possible grade C. Then the spam filters actually fix themselves.
Magically.
Yeah. Sometimes, not all the time.
Yep, there's a question right there in the corner.
Hello, thank you for an insightful talk. I have a suggestion, not so much a question. In the data privacy sphere, there is more or less a pan-European requirement that companies must have a working contact in case somebody wants to have some issue with them. Should it actually be the same with security? The companies are mandated to have a security contact which is responsive to requests?
That would be great. I fully agree. And actually, we sometimes use the data privacy officer. So if you cannot find any sensible contact from the companies, we go to the GDPR paperwork and see if we can find any names from there. And then we say that, hey, you have export database. This might be a data privacy issue. So can you forward this? But for the security, that would be lovely. And it will make sense also. I have a little bit of time. Quick story. We once reported a vulnerability for a large organization. We had been telling them that you should have a security contact in the past. They hadn't implemented that yet. Back then, we wrote exploits also to demonstrate the vulnerability. We don't do that anymore, but a long time ago. So that report got passed inside the organization from some people to another. And at some point, it ended up on the table of some unfortunate person in US. The person didn't have a clue what to do with the report, so he posted it into some news group that I got this kind of report that can you help? And it contained the exploit for the remote exploit for the firewall they were doing. So it makes sense for the companies to have a security contact who can handle this in coordinated manner. All right, any other questions?
There is. Indeed.
The Trafficom advised those 150 plus small and medium enterprises to drop those ATCs. vendors?
The jury is still out on that. We haven't completed the project completely. So let's see what happens on the C graders. Sorry, I don't have an answer for that. But the owners of the companies of those 150, they will learn which of their vendors are grade C, and then they will have constructive discussions with their vendors. And that's actually a good closing point. What I really love about this, it's actually on the meta level. So it's not that much about the vulnerabilities. It's a little bit more about how do they fix it. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is that we are keeping the vendors on their toes. They recognize that somebody actually cares about the security, somebody watches for the security, and somebody expects that the security is in good order in companies. So, looks like my time is up. I thank you very much for the questions. Lovely audience. Hope to be here sometime again. Thank you.
Fantastic. So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the previous sessions have helped organizers to unlock a secret that people who make a presentation get a present. Don't worry, everybody got one. Just not everybody on the stage. But we're going to try to continue with that. Thinking about informing people, it always reminds me about the lovely story from Estonia where they were sending an email, but they didn't know to whom the email address belonged. So we found out too late that vaccines should not have been kept in a too warm of an environment because it might be bad for them. But emails got sent. Now we're still looking for the guy who owns the email address. It kind of reminds me of registering my first email with hot.ee. You can deduce the first part yourself. I was 12, so it's not that difficult. It was hot and heavy, as one might say. Yeah, I still used it in law school, though. They were very happy to send the seminar materials to seksikas@hot.ee. It's still in work if anybody's interested. But moving along.